In this last project for the 12-day challenge, I'm going to show you how to paint and draw the little wren and also create a nice little bit of background for him as well. So we're going to start with some really basic shapes in our drawing grid, and I'm going to show you how to get there. For this series, we're going to be using a drawing grid. This will help me to show you how to get the shapes into proportion and positioned well inside your picture area. You will need to draw out a grid like this, 12 centimetres by 12 centimetres, and then draw 2 horizontal lines this way and 2 vertical lines this way. Each of these areas here should be 4 centimetres by 4 centimetres each. Of course, you could draw your grid a lot larger if you want your drawing to be larger, but I think it's quite fun to work on a small scale, especially when you're starting out. It's a good idea to use cheap copy paper to do this stage so that you feel less worried about doing it perfectly and you can just enjoy the sketching. Once you've drawn your grid, you can then either draw it each time that you're going to do a new piece of artwork, or you can photocopy it several times so you've got lots of grids ready for each drawing that we do. Okay, let's start by drawing some ovals and circles for the body and the head. So the first thing I'm going to do is quite a big oval or kind of egg shape. It's going to go in this direction. So we can start, say, in this central square and just round off that corner like that, and then take your pencil up and round, down to here, take off that corner, and sweep it round, and then join back up. So it's not a perfect oval, in fact it's a little bit kind of more pointy this end. That's the shape that we need for this bird. So that's the first basic oval shape. And then where this line intersects with this line, start there and draw yourself a circle that's about that big. So you can see where one shape crosses over the other shape. Like so. And then we need a beak, so we're going to just draw that as a little triangle for now. So just do the pointy bit like this, you know that the head is kind of facing downwards, and then somewhere along this line but quite low down you can put a circle for the eye, so I'd say probably about there. Can always adjust that a little bit later when we do our finer drawing. Then let's add a shape for the tail, so we can go up in a sort of rectangular shape into this top right hand section here. So we can just draw it in a very squared off shape, and then we can draw our feathers within there later on. And then I want to give the bird a twig to be sitting on, or a little branch, so let's draw a line coming out from here. And up through this section and into this section. So remember, this doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line because we're drawing a twig, so it's going to be all wobbly anyway. You might actually want to deliberately make it a bit more of a wobbly shape. Anyhow, but that's given us a nice kind of resting place for the bird. And then the way this bird is actually sitting is kind of sitting more on, we can see a bit more of one leg than we can the other one. So on this side, all we're going to see is just the claws really here. So you can just kind of add those like this. And then the other one is going to be a little bit further back here, so I might adjust this a little bit when we do the finer drawing, but there's going to be another foot coming down here. So we'll pop those in for now. See if we want to change them a bit later on, but at least he's kind of sitting there nicely on that twig. So that's the first basic drawing. Now I want to refine this drawing a bit more. What I'm going to do is to start at this point here, take a little bit off that circle of the head and draw a smoother line back to the tail. So I've got a much smaller shape there, and then what we can do is take away the lines that we don't need. It will start to make a bit more sense. Because with this little bird, he's kind of like smoother on the top, and then he's rounder underneath. So we'll keep the roundness of that there for the moment. And then what I want to do is curve this line inward slightly and down and round. So it's, if you go from the bottom of the beak in and back round to the initial shape that you drew, and then tidy that up a little bit so you can see what you've done. There we go. So his head is starting to look like it's joining onto the body. Then what we can do is just take away this inner line here, this one of these guidelines. It will help us to see the shape a bit better. And you can take away this one. We've got that really nice bird shape there now. So let's think about the tail. So I want to draw some feathers in the tail. I want to make it a little bit sort of narrower at the top than we've got it at the moment. So I'm going to round that shape off like that and get rid of my guidelines. And then we can add some feathers in there of different sizes. So I'm going to start off with a thin one there. Maybe a thicker one there. You've got a variety of feather shapes there. Just tidy that a little bit. So you want that tail to be a little bit narrower here, a bit wider there. And then we want to give him a wing. So I'm going to go from round about this point here in this middle box, and I'm just going to draw a sweeping shape, comes up and round like that. It's a nice sweeping curve, and then that returns and comes back down into the body again like this. So it's kind of like a big long triangle really. And then we can lose that guideline there. Then we could just do a bit of work on the eye. So the eye it's got like a little pointy corner there, and we want to put a small circle in the middle. That's going to give us a little bit of light in the eye. And then the beak is slightly more curved. At the moment we've got a triangle, but we could just give it a bit more of a curvy line for the beak. Round, like so. So it's a bit more of a curvy triangle there. And we've got the legs in place, so I think that one was probably about right there. Can't see much of that one, you can just see the claws. And we could just add a couple of detail lines to the branch that's there. So just a couple of circular lines on the branch, helps to give it a bit of shape and form. I feel that it's a bit low here, so I might just slim him down a little bit here. Just to refine that shape a bit. Better. Then you can have a little bit more leg there. And that's all we need to do for the initial drawing. So let's now draw through onto our art paper. So I'm using watercolour paper and a light box to just trace my image through. You could use tracing paper, or you could put your image up against a bright window and put your art paper in front of that, and it would have the same effect. Making this quite wobbly, this branch. I think it will look more natural. Slightly wider this end than this end as well. I'm just going to put those simple markings on there to remind us to paint those in later. That's all we need for the drawing. So now it's time to paint our little bird. And for that I've chosen to use a couple of browns. So I've got burnt sienna there, which is the lighter brown, and the sepia, which is a darker brown. So you might have burnt umber or raw umber for that. I've also got a lighter green and a medium green. So we're going to use two different greens, and we're going to create a nice interesting background. You will also need your palette and your drawing, and I'm also using 3 different brushes for this one. So I've got quite a large one there, a very small detail one, and a medium sized one. So if you've got those handy, that will be good. Okay, let's start by putting out a little bit of the lighter brown, the burnt sienna. And we're going to paint the first layer of the bird, which is going to be sort of quite a light layer to start with. Before we do that, I'm going to just wet the area. So I'm using my bigger brush and I'm going to just wet the body of the bird. I'm going to leave the eye, so I haven't put any water in there. So this is just clear water, just to make the area damp. It's good to use a bigger brush when you're doing this, if you've got one handy, because it's a lot quicker. Just be careful to only go up to the lines that you've drawn, because wherever the wet is where the paint will go when you drop it in. So try, if you can, to keep within the lines. So let's just do the body and the wing for now. And then just let that sink in a little bit. We don't want it too puddly, we just want the paper to be damp. In the meantime, you can mix up your burnt sienna, so we don't want it as dark as that, so let's just take a little bit of it and really dilute it here. It's very light. And then you might want to watch where I put this first before you do yours. But I'm going to start with the head. I'm just going to drop that colour in so you can see it dilutes itself again as it hits the water on the surface. I just want this to be very nice and light. Just blend it away like that. Put a bit of fluff on there. And then some down here. It's just very, very subtle. And then we need to let that dry, just blend away any edges that you have so it's nice and soft. And let that dry for a few minutes, or use a hairdryer to dry. So I've made sure that that's nice and dry at this point. And I want to do a little bit of work on the background. So for that I'm going to use lighter green to start with. Now for this part I'm going to use 2 brushes, so I'm going to have one to apply the paint and one to blend out the paint. So this one I just want to have it as a clean brush that's just kind of damp and on the side. So I'm going to get a little bit of paper, kitchen roll there, and have my damp brush handy, and then I'm going to use this brush to apply the paint. So what I want to do is paint all around the bird with the green. So if you don't have this lime green as a set colour in your pack, then you can make it by mixing a bright yellow with a green that you already have, and that'll make a nice lime green. And then let's just work our way around the bird. Nice fresh colour. I want this to kind of be like a vignette, so don't paint right to the edge, just to about there, and then take your damp brush and you can just blend away so that the edge of that green kind of melts off towards the edge of the paper. And come back with your colour brush. And again, just blend off as you go. Sometimes when you're painting foliage, it's quite nice to use a bit of a scribbly motion with your brush. You kind of end up with little windows through the colour, which gives the impression of a bit of texture going on. So we'll do that with this green, and we'll do it a bit more with the next green. And then allow that to dry, or get it dry with your hairdryer. So now that's nice and dry again, we can move to using the darker green. And we'll just do something very similar over the top of the green that we've already applied. So we've got sort of two nice greens going on. So in the same way, I'm going to use this one to apply the colour, and then the other bigger brush to blend out the colour. So this time we're going to use a lot more of this kind of scribbly motion, because there you can see in the little areas that I don't paint, you can see the lighter green coming through, so kind of gives the impression of foliage. So when you're doing that, paint very carefully up to where the bird is, so that it's not scribbly there. So just be careful with your edges. As you come away from there, you can be a little bit more loose with your painting. So, and then we just blend that out again, so it melts off to the edge of the page in the same way that you did the other green. Just going to move that. Good idea just to do a small area and then blend that and then move to your next area. Because if you go all the way around, by the time you come back with your blending brush, it will be too dry for it to blend out, so you have to kind of do it in stages. I like the effect that that creates. Be careful in your smaller areas. Forget that little bit under there. So that's created quite a nice sort of mottled effect that's like leaves and things in the background, and it's got a nice soft edge to it. Now let that get nice and dry before I start painting anything else, so that one thing doesn't bleed into another. And the next thing I'm going to do is just paint the tail. So I'm going to use the burnt sienna. This time I'm going to use it a little bit stronger than we did before. And for the tail I'm just going to paint straight onto the dry paper because I want the colour to be stronger. So just paint the whole of this section in. Like so. And we can also just paint these feet and legs in. and then we'll just let that dry. And we can move to the back and the wing. So this time I'm going to start with the brown, and as it comes towards the head from the wing and the back, I'm going to use the blending brush to blend that out. So make sure that you've got your blending brush ready and it's just damp. So we're going to go on to dry paper for this section. Just go up to the wing to start with. And just bring it along to part way there. And then get your blendy brush. And blend that away. So you should get that really nice kind of graduated effect along there. And in the same way we can do that with the wing. So let's start the tip on the dry surface. Paint our way down, and then using the damp brush just blend away. So whilst we're doing that sort of technique, what I want to do is intensify a bit the colour on the head. So in a very similar way, we're going to start right on the edge there, and then create sort of like a area of stronger colour. Like so, just to about that much, and then use your blending brush to smooth out those edges. So you should have some quite nice different graduations of colour there, and then really let that dry before we do anything else on there. The next part is going to involve using the darker brown, so let's pop some of that out. So I want to paint the branch that the bird is sitting on, but I want to do that in two stages. So I'm going to do a lighter layer first. This is very dark, you don't want to go in too dark to start with. Let's do a lighter layer, and then once that's dry we'll do some details on there. So we're just really going to fill in this area. Very carefully paint around the feet that are there, claws. Carefully paint right to the end. And then definitely let that dry before you paint anything else near it. In this next part, we're going to do the sort of characteristic markings of this bird, which are sort of quite stripy in a way. So we need a smaller pointed brush if you have one, because some of these details are quite fine. So I'm going to start with the tail, and we're just going to do some lines going across. So try and make them wiggly if you can. You see I'm using the very point of my brush, and these are not kind of evenly spaced, so try and vary the spaces between them. So I've got 2 together there, 3 together there, have a bigger space, have another couple. Next we can do the markings on the back of the bird. So these are very fine stripy marks as well, slightly wavy. So we want to try and follow the shape of the bird, it's kind of curving over. Keep it very, very delicate though, your lines. I'm just getting a bit less as you come closer to the head there. And then whilst that's drying for a bit, we can just put the beak in. So let's paint in the beak and just leave a tiny little area of light on the top there, like that. So it's just like a little circle that we leave white and paint the rest in. And we can do the same with the eye, so we can just use that dark brown for the eye. I'm going to leave a little area of light in there. Looks a bit more lively now. So let's move to this wing that's here. So on the wing, the markings are a little bit sort of thicker. So I'll start up this end. So these ones are thin up here. Again, it's just kind of stripes coming down. And then start to get a bit thicker and bolder. Like so. And then lessen off again here. And then I want to do some markings underneath here and over the head, but I don't want it to be quite so dark as that. So I'm just going to wet my brush a bit more just to dilute the paint so it's a bit lighter. And then he's got some tiny markings coming up and over the head. So these very, very fine marks, they kind of follow the line of the head up and over the top. And then just take your brush and do a very sort of light line that outlines the eye. Kind of follow around the shape. Twiddle it off. And then from the eye there's some very fine lines that kind of wiggle out from there, so kind of almost look like eyelashes. Some nice markings around the eye. And then I want to go down underneath here, so again very sort of light fine ones underneath this area, because if that's nice and light that will make the wing stand out more boldly. Just kind of come up around his tummy just a little bit, and then they kind of lessen off like so. And they're really all the markings that he has. So that'll just be drying by itself. So I want to go back down to the branch now and just put in some detail by way of a few lines going round, so it'll help to make the branch look rounder rather than flat. And then with that same dark brown, we can just create a little bit of an area of shadow on the underside of the branch. So I do this by just painting in a line that's not, it's different kind of widths as it goes down. So just follow the line that you've already got and create that shadow area. Makes things look a bit more 3D. And then I want to create a little bit of shadow underneath the bird where he's sitting. So if we start underneath here and add the darker brown. He's kind of casting a shadow on there. And in there. And then we can just move down to this last bit here. And then he's pretty much done. Thank you for joining me on the 12-day painting and drawing challenge. I hope you've been able to learn a few new techniques. I've enjoyed showing you, and I look forward to seeing you on another course. And well.